Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Stefan. Longtime friends, but now I get to finally come on your pod, so I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, of course. Love the work you're doing. And I know you're doing a range of things Bitcoin Core contribution. You're an organizer of Austin BitDevs, or one of the organizers, and yeah, working on a bunch of things. So let's get into some of this stuff. So, yeah, maybe let's just get your view just broadly on what's going on in the space and what you're following. What's exciting to you in terms of Bitcoin and Bitcoin development?
Yeah, Bitcoin has been like kind of a little weird since Taproot activated, where like now there's no like next thing. Like CTV kind of had its time in the light, but then not so much anymore. And so like what I've kind of been focused on recently is just like Lightning privacy stuff. And like my open source life, like full time, I'm the Bitcoin company, but when I'm not selling gift cards, I try to do some Bitcoin stuff. So yeah, like me and some like friends like Tony Giorgio and Paul Miller have been doing some like lightning research on different privacy stuff, and like kind of turned into a couple hackathon projects we did where I made something called Trans LND, which lets you like rotate lightning pub keys. And we're working on other various ideas of trying to like figure out like how to make your best lightning node if you could.
Gotcha. And so the whole privacy aspect is a hot one right now. There's a lot of discussion about fungibility, censorship resistance, what exactly is required. So let's talk a little bit about the privacy aspects just generally. As I think it's fair to say, if you just use Bitcoin by default without any techniques, you're not necessarily being private. And I think it's probably important for people to understand that, but also understand it's not like there's zero hope either. So at least that's how I'm seeing it. Do you want to give us your view? And actually, it would be really interesting for you to answer this question as well. Do you believe Bitcoin is fungible?
I think Bitcoin's fungible. Like if you can find me some cheaper Bitcoin, I'd like to buy it. But or, or if it's more expensive, I'd like to sell it. But yeah, I think Bitcoin privacy is a problem. Like we're not it's not completely confidential. When you make a given address, people can see all the transactions that come from that address, and this has spurred like chain analysis companies to exist, as well as privacy companies to fight it, as well as like people just kind of use it for fun too, where you go to blockchain.info and see if your transaction is confirmed and stuff like that. So it is a problem where like with different heuristics and stuff, you can kind of like weed out like, what someone's wallet balance, or if someone's doing certain things like multi-sig versus lightning versus just normal single sig. So there's problems there. We have made lots of steps like since the dawn of Bitcoin to actually improve this with things like Taproot was most recent upgrade to Bitcoin that really added a lot of potential benefits that are yet to be implemented, but we'll have that in the future. And as well as like there's lots of other ideas and things that don't need like soft forks like Taproot, like things like CoinJoin and CoinSwap, that make it a lot better. So it is always a ever going problem, and kind of the hard part is like you kind of need to know what you're doing, at least today. But as things get better, it'll get probably easier, I imagine.
Sure. And so the other aspect with Bitcoin privacy is, let's say, the elephant in the room is the KYC aspect, right? And I'm not saying this from a position of I'm coming from the moral high ground. Obviously, I work at Swan Bitcoin, and many people in the space are either working in the industry, and many of the companies in the space are having to do KYC on their customers. And then as part of that, they're often having to work with chain surveillance firms who in turn are, potentially getting access to some of that data, and that can make it more difficult for a person to be private in Bitcoin. So, what are your thoughts on that aspect, the pervasiveness of chain surveillance and the KYC?
Yeah, I mean, KYC is obviously a problem because it forces the user to, like you have to upload pictures of, my documents, and even a selfie, like saying I'd like to do whatever. And, it's for one, it's terrible UX because you have to go through that whole process. But for two, it's a huge, security vulnerability in Honeypot where all the time things get hacked. Like I think like maybe this week there's a news announcement that like 1 billion people got doxxed from like a China hack or something. Like in it's not actually really stopping any of these like nefarious actors. Where most likely it's just your someone's going to upload a document and then it's going to get hacked, and now someone's going to steal your identity. And I think something like 1 in 4 Americans have had their identity stolen. Like, I know people in my family have had their identity stolen before. It's like, it's an actual problem that, like, now you have to, like, get lawyers, and it's just a huge headache. You're going to lose lots of money potentially. So it's never good. And the touted reason why they're doing it is, to stop money laundering, to stop child pornographers, to stop drug traffickers, anything, whatever the boogeyman is. And in reality, it doesn't really stop much at this. Like, what they're actually going to do is going to go find a stolen identity on the dark market and buy that, and then do whatever they want. Or there's KYC versions of or KYC free versions of how we do most things as anyway, so they can just use something like that. So all this stuff will exist, and it's kind of impossible to stop. So it's like, if we're gonna not stop, like, we're not stopping the bad stuff and just harming the good stuff, like the good users, like, what are we even doing here? So I think that is a problem. And then the chain analysis part just kind of makes it worse, where like, chain analysis is done by, like, your own wallet probably does mild forms of chain analysis to try to give yourself privacy, where it's checking, like, what are my transactions, how should I make the most efficient transaction, and what kind of change output should I use to make when I spend this and stuff like that. But the chain analysis, like companies like Chainalysis, Elliptic, whatever, what they really, like, their secret sauce is they take, they have their view of the blockchain like everyone else, but then they get all these data from, like, Coinbase and Kraken and maybe Swan, I don't know, like all these companies that are KYCing users, and they pull them together, so they have this, like, huge holistic view of, like, okay, like, user A withdrew to this address on Coinbase, and then to this address on Kraken, and now I can see, oh, okay, they're this is their wallet, and then they have a record of, like, this entire user's balance, and they use lots of these heuristics that's they claim to be anonymized, but it's really not, because you're using it from KYC information. So it kind of creates this, like, just another honeypot of information. And we've seen this various problems with that, where, I mean, it wasn't exactly a KYC thing, but when the ledger got hacked and all the addresses of their users got doxxed, we there's, like, lots of, like, people at first getting, like, emails and text messages, like, trying to hack their coins off their ledger, to get them to, like, install bad firmware or something, or enter their seed phrase online. But eventually, I think there was reports of people, like, actually getting, like, knocks on their front door because they got a ship to their house and stuff. So that's, like, actually threatening human lives, which is awful. And that's just with a shipping address. When we're doing actual, like, IDs and birth certificates, whatever you want, like, it gets so much worse, and you can cause a lot of harm that way. So isn't it, like, objectively, it's a bad thing. And the people that are trying to enforce this, there's just regulators out in DC or whatever that have no repercussions. You're just like, well, that's bad, so let's do something that just they think it makes it better, but it doesn't.
Unfortunately, it seems that the answer is always do more regulation, do more KYC, do even more surveillance. And yet, the more surveillance they're doing on the world, for all of this cost that they've imposed on banks, financial services, Bitcoin companies even, they haven't got a lot to show for it. And in fact, there is research on this. I interviewed Dr. Ron Paul, P-O-L, not Paul, and he has spoken about how ineffective the AML regulation is. But I mean, anyway, I guess the point is, what should Bitcoiners be doing? How should Bitcoiners be anti-AML laws? Should they be advocating in other ways in the public system, or is it more about building code, writing code? What are you thinking that Bitcoiners should do about it?
I mean, you should do whatever you can. Like, I'm a coder, so I'll probably, like, my kind of personal mission is kind of build software that helps you get away from this. But 90% of the world doesn't know how to code, so you can go and do other things. Like, you could, like, I don't think you know how to code, Stephan, but you make a podcast where you bring up these issues and try to get people informed. Or other people can go and, like, talk to their senator and try to get actual laws changed, or create educational tools on all the various things. But yeah, it's a hard problem, but, like, there are tools to get around this. Like, if you don't want to buy on a KYC exchange, for obvious reasons we just stated, there's lots of other ways. There's, like, things like RoboSats and Bisq. That's just like an online P2P exchange that lets you do things. There's also just, like, the good old classic, like, go to your local Bitcoin meetup and shake hands with someone. Like at Austin BitDevs here, we have a huge meetup, and people come here all the time. So there's lots of times where people are like, hey, I'm trying to get some cash. Anyone can anyone hook me up? And then they shake hands later and send some Bitcoin, and that's perfectly fine to do and legal. Pay your taxes if you want, but that it's a completely normal thing to do, and it's not like a total like you show up in a mask with like 3 guns and a knife and hopefully don't get jumped. Like we're downtown Austin. Like you'll get caught if you try to, or we'll break your knees at the next Bitcoin meetup. So you should be fine. And there's ways to get around it. Like and I don't know, it's not the most hardest thing in the world. I know like many people, their first introduction to Bitcoin wasn't on something like Coinbase. Their first introduction was on like Bisq or something, which is it's supposed to be the advanced Bitcoiner thing, but people are able to do it. So if you like guide people through that you want to help, or if you haven't done it yourself, you should really try because it's not that hard.
Sure, yeah, and look, I don't have anything against non-KYC acquisition of coins. I encourage people to do that also. I think for me, and what I'm thinking about here is also the scalability aspects of it. Like how many people can realistically do that? Like as an example, I looked at the Bisq volume over the last week. I think I looked up the stat yesterday. That number was about $125,000 worth of volume on Bisq over a week.
So
So
yeah, that's
it's
like nothing compared to Coinbase or something. So that's a problem. So getting around that's the harder problem. You can mine Bitcoin. That's a great solution where lots of people will just they'll just buy a lot of miners up front. That doesn't require KYC. I mean, and electricity doesn't require KYC as well. So you could just have a huge mining operation and mine some Bitcoin. It does require other skill sets, but it is possible.
Of course, yeah, and to be clear, I'm not trying to FUD Bisq or anything like that. I think
Yeah, yeah.
people should be, willing to use it. And the other aspect of it is that volume number might be also down from maybe a few months ago when the we weren't as deep into a bear like we are now. And also, some of that volume might be happening off those platforms, right? People might already meet one time and then only do the first trade on the platform and then do other trades off the platform. So to be clear, that volume number is not taken as gospel, right? It can change, and there are other platforms like RoboSats and Hodl and peer-to-peer stuff and in-person Bitcoin meetups and things like this. But I think in terms of where the industry is going, I think that's probably also an interesting question, right? Is it likely that every legal or above board Bitcoin business gets forced and pushed down this pathway? I think that's probably the tougher question. And is there a way out of that?
And I sure hope they don't. And like, luckily, like, this is like a gradient. Like, you could have like, something like Bitcoin Core that doesn't talk to any outside service. It's just your own thing. That'll never have to do a KYC. But something like Coinbase, where they have custody of your funds and they give you tax records and all that stuff, that likely that has KYC on it because of regulations and because things like if you died, well, who do we give this money to? And the KYC lets them figure that stuff out with like legal claims and stuff. But as a user, you should have a choice. So there are different services that let you do that. And like for us at the Bitcoin company, like today, like we sell gift cards, you get sats back in your account, and so we're not like having to like sell you Bitcoin. There's no tax implications like that we have to report for you or anything like that. So like we don't take anything. We just have like an email, and that's fine because like what the only things we need to comply with is like OFAC compliance, which is like there's like 14 addresses or something we're not allowed to send to, which most likely our user doesn't have the private key to, so who cares? And so like stuff like that's a lot easier to get around. But as you add in things like buying Bitcoin with fiat money, then it gets a lot harder because then you come under like the purview of these other regulatory things and stuff, and that's where it gets hard. So I mean, legally today you need to take KYC, but the chain analysis part is always just like a hairy thing where like a lot of times it's not like they won't knock on your door and like shut down your company if you don't, but then like no liquidity provider will work with you if you don't have chain analysis or anything like that. So that gets weird, but a lot like all these laws are it's just like the banks are these fiat institutions that just want to comply with everything because that's how they make their money with the regulatory moat. So they require all these things, and a lot of times they're just like they're doing the full like, you know, the law will say like do the most reasonable thing or something. So they take that as, oh, well, do all the chain analysis possible because that's completely reasonable to them. But as Bitcoiners, we obviously don't, or hopefully don't believe that. I personally don't. So I think it's reasonable to do zero chain analysis. Like, so you have a debate with your lawyer and stuff and find what's comfortable, but reasonably it makes sense. I think like to if we're doing this OFAC, like there's 13 people in the world we're not allowed to send Bitcoin to, I'll be fine with that. Like I won't send money to Osama bin Laden, but I'll send Bitcoin to everyone else. And so
For
I think
sure.
that's fine. But like handling the rest of that is it's just like a gradient you have to do, and based on like what you're trying to do as a business.
Yeah, for sure. And so some of this, I think it came up, it flared up a little bit with some of the recent debates on Twitter as well, where you said, you made that comment of saying, look, if we had to do it, then that's the point I'd be quitting. And I totally respect that, of course. I think the question from my point of view as well is just how pervasive it is in the industry that even if you were to quit, even if you would quit one particular employer because they're doing chain surveillance and okay, let's say that's their regulatory, requirement and so on, then the challenge is even if you were to get funding, how many companies or firms in the space are offering, let's say, developer funding without any connection to, say, KYC and surveillance, let's say the Geminis of the world, or the others who are doing that. It just is that pervasive, isn't it?
Yeah, and on that comment too, like you can do like your own chain analysis without like having to like go use these like insidious companies like chain analysis and Elliptic, where like and those you're like just pulling all of your data with these other huge honeypots of data and just making it worse for like your personal users. But like if you're trusting yourself to take this KYC data, you should be able to trust yourself, and you can legally, I think, like do the chain analysis yourself, which can be whatever you dictate is reasonable. So, I wouldn't like, quit if we had to do our own personal reasonable chain analysis. But
I see.
yeah,
Yeah.
but in that regard as well, like what you're saying on like other companies, like say like they're like you have to use Elliptic and go. So I quit, and it's like, oh yeah, the now every other company is doing it as well, so you're kind of shit out of luck. But I do like I like the case where like everyone and their mother is sponsored by Spiral today, where you have they're just giving out grants, but there are a few people sponsored by things like Coinbase and Gemini, and these other like casino type companies, and those are actually my favorite grants because you're taking money from the M&E and bringing it to Bitcoin development. So I'm happy to take money from the bad people and bring it towards the light. So I think that's okay, but it is you do have that taint of you're getting the dirty money, but as I said in the beginning, I think Bitcoin's fungible, so that's okay.
Yeah, of course, of course. And so on the topic of, okay, so I guess firstly, there's that point that you made, which is if we're thinking of the gradient here, the worst is to create the massive globalized honeypot of chain analysis and Elliptic, who, when if they can, again, we're speculating a little bit here, but presumably this is what they're doing, is they're able to pull the KYC data and the chain data of many customers across many exchanges. Whereas what you're saying is in a gradient sense, in a less bad sense, if you're doing your own personal risk analysis of coins, of customer coins, where they're coming from, where they're going, and things like this, then that's less bad because at least you're not creating the honeypot aspect.
Hmm.
Now, of course, the privacy purists would still object to that. They would say, no, hang on, you're still trying to surveil your customers. But in this world where we're dealing with government and regulators, and the only way that you can do things at scale, at least in certain business models, is to have to comply with that. So obviously, I think it's a position of we don't like that, but at the same time, we also understand that the only way to really grow the pie meaningfully is to have to play inside that regulated pool. I guess is that kind of how you're seeing it?
Yeah, because I sadly I think like most people won't onboard Bitcoin in the like no KYC way, and I think that's just because you can like you can provide a much better UX by doing that, and like like Coinbase has a beautiful app. Like I don't like them, but they did a good job, and like Bisq is kind of hard to use. It is usable, and you can do it if you want, but my mom's probably not going to want to do that, and so I think like if you want to bring Bitcoin to the masses, some people are just going to capitulate. And do we want Coinbase running that and getting all those users, or do we build it ourselves? So I think it'd be better if we have like a real Bitcoiners do it, like like you guys are doing at Swan, or like Cash App or River, what we're trying to do at the Bitcoin company, like same thing. So I'd like, if people are gonna go that route, let's give them the best tools possible, and inform them like, hey, we're taking this and we don't want to, but these are the risks. So I think that is important, and yeah, and scaling that up is good. And so yeah, and when you're doing this as well with this internal chain analysis, like you get to make your own risk metrics as well. Then, so like I think like in the past, like people like BlockFi and BottlePay were like blocking coin joins from coming into their exchange, versus like that's just most likely that's just their chain analysis provider being like, oh, that's bad, block. And versus like when you're doing internally, you're like, oh yeah, coin join, those are cool, good job, you get we'll give you a bonus because you're cool now. You do whatever you want. So that is like a not only are you not just feeding the honey pat, but you're also letting yourself control like exactly what you want to do. So you don't have to if someone decides CoinJoin is bad, you don't have to just immediately start blocking those. You can decide on your own and stuff.
Of course. And so in terms of the hopes then for stopping the chain analysis and the elliptics of the world, what are the big ideas in your mind? I think one idea I can see is this idea of trying to stop the common input ownership heuristic, or undermine it in a way where, as an example, if we did a lot of Lightning channel collaborative channel opens, then that helps undermine that heuristic, which is a key heuristic that they rely on. So that's one idea. But I'm curious, what do you see as what's really going to move the needle here in terms of actually obsoleting them or making them less relevant?
Yeah. So like, yeah, these chain analysis companies, they have two inputs. One is the actual blockchain, and the other is the KYC exchange. So like if you stop using them for your KYC exchange, you block off one input. So now we have to worry about the other input, which is the blockchain. And yeah, so like things like you're mentioning, like this common input heuristic, where if when you have a transaction that has multiple inputs in it, chain analysis firms generally just assume that every input is owned by the same person, because 99% of the chance that's going to be true. So it's a good way to do that. So if me and you are doing a transaction, if both of our inputs are in there, now they're going to think that both of those are my inputs, or both of those are your inputs. They're actually both of ours. So now our wallet histories get clustered together in their like data set. So now it gets harder to actually dictate what's happening. So that improves things a lot. And typically the kind of way you do this is either like a coin join, but that's very explicit. So they kind of know to exclude those, but they just know like, oh, after a coin join, it's kind of gone. We have to create a new wallet history. But other like sneakier ways are things like pay join, where you're actually able to hide the actual payment amount and the inputs that are in there of who owns what, because you're adding in the receiver's input. So you can do all these fancy techniques to hide that, as well as things like coin swap, where you can instead of like, you're not breaking this common input heuristic by having a transaction with two inputs, but you actually just have two transactions where you and say like me and you would swap both like the same amount UTXO. So like I start with UTXOA, you start with UTXOB at the end, and I have UTXOB and you have UTXOA. So that way, we just swap histories, and no one can tell that we did that, because they never in the same transaction. So that's other ways to do that. But it's all kind of they're all just incremental steps you're trying to get better. Because there are, if you do all this and then you just go and deposit into Coinbase, now they see, okay, that last address is his. So you're always something you're always keeping up with and trying to improve. And technology is always improving this as well. Like before Taproot, if we and you were doing coin swaps, then you deposited it into a multi-sig, and I kept it on a single sig, it'd be obvious. It'd be like, okay, Stephan's a multi-sig user. I think he just went to his wallet, and it'd be obvious that you did that. Versus now with Taproot, we can hide that you're actually using multi-sig. So these would look the same, and not just multi-sig, but things like Liquid, or even like Lightning. All these different things can all look the same now. So it makes it even harder to do all these heuristics.
Of course. And so what you're referring to there is this new output type, Taproot. And so, just like how we went through historically, we upgraded to the native SegWit addresses. Now we've got these Taproot addresses. Now, I suppose one criticism that could be leveled at us here is Taproot's anon set right now is very small because there's not that many users of Taproot. Now, I know, for example, BTC Pay Server's wallet supports Taproot. I know Moon Wallet, I think they are actually using Taproot in the background. But in terms of Taproot Lightning channels, that's not really here yet, although I believe that's coming soon. But I'm curious your view on that about growing the Taproot anonymity set.
Yeah. It's we do like yeah. There's a couple wallets using it. LND just released it for their on-chain wallet, but not for Lightning channels. I think I was told by like end of fall-ish that they'll have it. So hopefully like soonish. But yeah, it is something that like if you're a Taproot user today, you're like one of like maybe 10,000 people. So you're not you're reducing your anonymity set. But I think just like building tools on top of this and getting people ready to support, because like a lot of wallets don't even support sending the Taproot addresses and stuff yet. So we just kind of need to do this incremental process. And it was nice with SegWit because when we switched over to there's an economic incentive where you would have cheaper transactions when you switch to SegWit. So then you could so that naturally a lot of people moved over just to save money. But now with Taproot, it's more of a privacy saving thing than a fee saving thing. Like you're maybe saving a couple bytes, but like it's you're not going to be saving like 30% whatever you would with SegWit. But there is like kind of a push towards that because lots of people are like saying like luckily like kind of the Bitcoin kind of initial use case is now moving towards like a Lightning wallet than an on-chain wallet. I feel like most people get on board onto something like a Moon or just a traditional Lightning wallet. So in that regard, since Lightning is much better when we have Taproot everywhere, all these Lightning wallets are moving towards a Taproot first look. So that's going to help a lot. So maybe Bitcoiner that got in 2013 that has its cold storage buried in Argentina. He's not going to upgrade the Taproot, but all the new users coming in are going to upgrade the Taproot just because that's what their wallet supports and is the default now. So I think that will be a big help.
Yeah. And actually, on this, now, again, this may be triggering to some listeners. And I'm not saying I like this reality, but this is perhaps the reality that we have to acknowledge. I've seen some interesting statistics from Sergey Kotliar of Bitrefill, and he speaks about, and it's an interesting framework. It's this idea of Bitcoin the tool and Bitcoin the movement. And so, obviously, people like you and me, and even Sergey, are arguably part of the Bitcoin movement. We go to Bitcoin conferences, we speak, we talk to our friends there, and so on. But then there are these users who are not necessarily ideological about it, right? And by ideological, I mean, broadly speaking, cypherpunk or libertarian-ish. Whereas there are a lot of people who use Bitcoin without having any ideology about it. So, for example, he makes the analogy, which is a good one, of BitTorrent. There are lots of BitTorrent users who are not ideological about it. They wouldn't go to a BitTorrent conference. They wouldn't call themselves part of the BitTorrent movement, let's say. And so just by the numbers, if you look at the stats on Bitrefill, he points out that actually a lot of the users are actually using things like Exodus wallet, which is like a shitcoin wallet, or they're using blockchain.info, right? So it's kind of funny because we have this ecosystem where in our Bitcoin world, we're always promoting, Bitcoin only and things like this. But objectively, out there in the real world, there are a lot of users being onboarded by basically shitcoin exchanges. And so I guess this is a reality we have to grapple with, isn't it?
Yeah, I know it's a hard problem. Like it was funny. Blockchain.com, their wallet switched to like SegWit like 4 years later, like a couple months before Taproot activated, and you like saw the chart in the graph just like go straight up. Like, and we, at Austin BitDevs, we made a ton of fun of it. It was like, well, in 4 years, we'll get to talk about when they add Taproot because who knows when they'll do that. But luckily there is like at least like a lot of new users are being pushed onto these like non-shitcoin wallets, it seems, but they still have like a huge dominance. So like I mean, luckily some of these are open source, so you can go and make the PR yourself. But if it's get merged, who knows? But yeah.
Yeah, of course. And so I think that's perhaps a little bit of cold water, but of course, we as a community can do what we can to advocate for obviously what we see as the leading wallets and Bitcoin companies that new people should be going and onboarding with. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that not everybody is, especially the new people coming in, at the top of that funnel, they're not going to be as ideologically committed or aligned as, say, we are. But nevertheless, there are possibilities for privacy and security to improve in the background, right, by default, where if this technology comes out and it eventually makes its way into the mainstream applications, and some of that happens by support from the more hardcore members of the community, the developers and the advocates and the educators out there. So I think it's not totally without hope, but it's just a recognition that it takes time to change things, right? And even on the question of SegWit, it depends on how we count it as well. So as I understand, if you count transactions based on if they have any SegWit whatsoever on any of the inputs, that number is something like 70 or 80%. But if we count it based on every output being SegWit, that number is more like 20% or 30%. So it's actually a lot lower, even for SegWit, which came out in August 2017, right? And here we are in June 2022, and we're still trying to get adoption of SegWit.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting people to change things, especially with their money, is always an extremely hard problem. So, I am hopeful, and luckily, all these things add new functionality. Without SegWit, we couldn't have Lightning. So any user that wants to use Lightning, they'll be forced to use SegWit. And, with Taproot, it'll enable other things. Most likely, Lightning will go to a Taproot only thing eventually. So, eventually, if a user wants to use Bitcoin, they'll have to use these kind of features, it seems. So, it's not all hope is lost, but in the meantime, we're all just screaming at our computers why won't you implement Taproot?
That's the campaign is to shout when Taproot,
exactly.
or when Lightning as well. So I think, and in fairness, that we are seeing Lightning adoption in terms of exchanges. We are seeing large exchanges who are supporting that, and so over time, that's more and more millions of customers who can use Lightning, and so it'll take time. But I see those network effects as growing. But it is perhaps some cold water that we have to face when we see statistics today in terms of who's spending today and how much Lightning use is today versus Bitcoin on chain today, even for small values, which we would presumably say, hang on, for that kind of value, you'd be better off using Lightning. Well, maybe that person is coming from a wallet that doesn't have Lightning, things like that. But nevertheless, let's talk a little bit about some of the ideas you have around Lightning privacy. I know you have this LN Vortex. So do you want to tell us what's LN Vortex?
Yeah, LN Vortex is a project I've been working on for about a year now. Basically, the idea is today, there's a couple coin join solutions like Samurai, Wasabi, and Join Market, but all of these are mostly just you spend to yourself. So you create a transaction that just spends to your own wallet, but you have more privacy at the end, so you're willing to pay for that. But when you want to combine that with Lightning, the typical flow is mix to yourself a few times, and then send it to your LND or C Lightning wallet, and then open a channel. So you have this extra step, and it's very obvious you're doing that. So that kind of sucks. And so the idea is to be able to kind of merge these two things, where you're coin joining to yourself, and then when you want to open a channel, you just do that in the same coin join, where you just instead of the output being yourself, it's now a Lightning channel. And a couple of things needed to happen for us to do this. The biggest, like we've been saying, is Taproot, where these on-chain transactions that to yourself are most likely going to be just a self-spend. And without Taproot, a self-spend, your own personal wallet, and the Lightning channel are very distinct. You can immediately tell which is which, or at least that they're different. So you would be able to tell in the coin join. It would reduce the anonymity set and wouldn't really work. But with Taproot, we can combine these two so they could just look exactly the same. And a great thing about Lightning Nodes is there's something that it's just something that you kind of just always need on. So I have a laptop sitting under my bed behind me that's just running a Lightning node all day, and it'd be great if this thing was just coin joining all day as well, because I got coins I want to mix. So kind of the idea is we have all these nodes that are running all day. Why aren't they always coin joining? And then when they want to open the Lightning channel, let's do that in a coin join as well. Just kind of give yourself a holistic approach of your on-chain balance, where you're almost making, if you're a Lightning first user, almost every on-chain transaction you're doing is now a coin join. So I've been working on that for about a year now. So what this current state of it is it kind of is using two separate mixes right now, where for one, it's you have like your mix to yourself, and then after you do that, you can open a channel. But once LND releases or any implementation releases the Taproot channels, then we'll just combine them both, and you'll be able to open a channel. And kind of a hard part about it was you can't really implement this into like Samurai or Join Market or Wasabi today, because you need to change the protocol a little bit. Where so today, like if say you're doing a Samurai mix, what you do is you register your inputs in a blinded output, and then you just wait for the mix to happen. So that could be in 10 seconds, that could be in 6 days. So you're just kind of waiting. And to have that output, you need to know where you're sending the money for this coin join. So you have to say like, okay, I would like to mix to this address, but you're hiding the address in that initial message, but you still need to know that address. And in Lightning, when I want to open a channel to you, I need to send money to that address in the next 10 minutes. So it doesn't really totally work with this like
Gotcha.
asynchronous flow in current coin joins. So Vortex is custom made for this, where you do a slightly tweaked flow where you register your thing right before you mix, so that way you can open that channel. And it's not like totally released yet. It works in tests. Me and my friend D-Regs, he's a front end dev at the Bitcoin company, works on Zeus and stuff as well. He's been helping me build the front end, and we're like about to do our first like testnet one. But it is coming along. Once we're probably going to release it hopefully soon and have like it on like Umbrel and all that. But the idea is really just let's get everyone coin joining, because like it seems like everyone and their mother has an Umbrel node running in their closet now. So like why not have those funds coin joining? And it's another incentive to get people on the Taproot, where now someone might be like, oh, I don't care about Taproot, that's too much work to upgrade. When you're like, oh, hey, you can coin join all your funds, get more privacy. If, people are like, oh, I could do that. So that's kind of the hope. And as well as with that, it will most likely be the first Taproot coin join coordinator. So that'll be cool to have as well. Where because today if you want to use Taproot, but you're like, oh, I need to coin join my funds, you have nowhere really to go. So you could like go into Samurai, mix, and then send to Taproot. Like we talked about earlier, now reducing your anonymity set by revealing that you're going to Taproot. So you're leaving the herd. So it's not a total holistic approach anymore. So hopefully with this, you could have like your Taproot users just only use this, and it's built in a way where it works with like lots of different types of wallets. So natively it supports LND, C Lightning, and Bitcoin Core. So Bitcoin Core doesn't have Lightning support, but you can still just mix to yourself in your own Taproot wallet if you'd like to do that. I'm gonna work on adding Sensei support soon, but Sensei needs a little more work to get fully worked out, but it is possible. So that'll be hopefully soon as well.
Okay, great. So can we walk through the flow then in this example? So let's say in the near future, this is available as an application that people can install on their package node, like Umbrel and so on, like Raspberry Blitz and all the others. What would the flow look like in this case? Is the user going to withdraw from the exchange into their LN Vortex wallet, and then the wallet is just going to do these Taproot coin joins in the background? Is that roughly what you're thinking, or what's the flow look like?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. So it doesn't have its own wallet. It just uses like your Lightning node wallets, like actual on-chain wallet. So it's nice. I didn't have to actually code that myself. It's just like LND or Core Lightning just handles that for you. So it just if you have funds on there, you can use it today. And then yeah, you would just like open up the Vortex app and just hit like I want to be mixing, or I want to open a channel. And so kind of what we're thinking is like you'll probably just download it initially, and then just click the mix my funds button, and then those funds will just always be mixing. And then
And so,
say a
yeah,
week,
go on.
and say like a week later, Stephan, you're like, I need some inbound, and be selling some hats. Can you open a channel to me? I'm like, sure. So I'll go into Vortex, type in your pub key, and then hit open channel, and then the next round I'll open a channel straight to you in a coin join.
Gotcha. Okay. And so is the idea then that you're just kind of plugging into the wallets that are already existing, as you were saying, and so then the users having this CoinJoin operating. And so I guess the other question as well is, who's running the coordinator? Are you going to run a coordinator for this, or how does that work?
Yeah. So it has to be its own coordinator. So I can't use like Wasabi or Samurai, any of those, because does have this slightly altered protocol. So I do have like a pleb friend that offered to run it, so they're going to be running it. I'm not going to say who, but yeah. So we'll have its own coordinator running, and that'll it'll just talk to that, and it'll have its we'll have multiple coordinators for like different output amounts and everything like that. But yeah.
So you might have different pools, as pool sizes as an example, that you might have like 0.1 or 0.5 or the baller pool, 1 Bitcoin pool or whatever. And so then you are just mixing your coins with other people in that same denomination, let's say, in that pool. And so then the idea is you open off of that, either your LND or your C Lightning can open a channel out of that and then just spend normally like you would with any Lightning wallet. Like let's say you have
Yeah,
Zeus connected to that.
yeah, exactly. So, you would like, have your umbrella just mixing, you open your channel, and then, you go to Starbucks and scan an invoice and just pay from now a mixed channel. So you get the this extra added privacy, because in Lightning, like, it's generally very private in most regards, like on the actual Lightning layer, but on the actual, like, Lightning requires a Bitcoin layer under it. And that is, as we know, fully it's, you can read the whole blockchain, so you need to hide these kind of UTXOs. You can do that once it's not announcing the channel, but still it people can find it, like what Tony Giorgio has been working on. But if you're a routing node, you still want to protect your on-chain funds. This is another way to do it, where you could hide this, and now you're just like, oh, this is a Vortex user, but I don't know what their on-chain wallet looks like.
Got it. And so it sounds promising, and it's definitely a step in the right direction of helping people have privacy through the entire flow, because it's not just kind of like a one-off thing. It's like you coin join and then you open a channel, and then now you're doing Lightning channels, which those transactions don't touch the chain per se. Now, of course, in Lightning, there's still improvement work required on that side too. And of course, there was the recent Lightning Summit. I think that was maybe a month or two ago. So, listeners, you can check out Bitcoin Ops OpTech newsletter 204. There's a summary there of Lightning developer meeting. And so there's things there like gossip network updates, or trying to potentially change some of the aspects about how Lightning shares balances and things like this. So these are some of the ideas coming that will help bring privacy to Lightning, because today Lightning is not super private, but it's kind of a complicated question where maybe the sender is getting a little bit more privacy than they do today on chain, just naively spending on chain. But there are some of these other aspects where, let's say, the channels have this aspect, what's it called, the short channel ID, where that's kind of pointing to the output of that channel on chain, whereas maybe in the future that could be changed with, let's say, gossip updates, right?
Yeah. So they actually just changed that, the channel ID thing. So now for unannounced channels, you can just have it be a random value. So you don't actually have to like dox it to people, or like they can probe it out of you and stuff. So that does help. But it's not a totally, like, that doesn't solve everything. Like you said, it is slightly better than on chain, where like on chain is being stored forever. So that is obviously not good. Versus with a Lightning payment, if they don't catch it in time, that whoever's trying to track you, they missed it. So you do have that benefit. But yeah, there is lots of problems where you are requiring this lower Bitcoin layer, so everyone knows these or can know these UTXOs that are using to like route these payments, as well as you have these static pub keys, which are like kind of identities on Lightning, so people tie different flows of that. And there are these things like probing, where you can kind of almost fish out balances of things, or detect payments going on. So there are lots of things coming, like you said. There was that summit. They talked about different things. One of the like kind of bigger things that I think will be big is things like trampoline routing and blinded paths. They're both like by themselves like powerful, but together they're like extremely powerful. What trampoline lets you do is just kind of say like, um, you don't tell someone like, this is like how to get to me. You say like, oh, I have a friend, Stephan. You can pay him and he'll pay the rest to me. And so what that lets you do is just kind of say like, you don't have to totally gossip like how all of your private channels do you want to receive through, or anything like that. You just say like, get it to him. He knows how to get to me. So that kind of like, you get a barrier there. and you can actually use multiple trampolines. So you could say like, oh, Stephan knows how to get to me, and then they're like, well, how do I get to Stephan? You're like, oh, well, Marty knows how to get to Stephan, and then Satoshi knows how to get to Marty. You can do this whole thing. So you just have these like layers of obscurity, and as well you can layer in these blinded paths where instead of saying like, I don't know, because Stephan, you need to know how to get to me at that. But instead of like giving you the full route, I could say like go to this guy, and then he'll have a encrypted version of how to get to the next guy, and then encrypted version of how to get to the next guy. So it's just this easily doing that, you kind of just completely hide the way you're trying to pay me, and it gets really powerful. But there's lots of spec work and things actually need to be done to get these implemented and in the wild for everyone's using them. But it is possible, so that's helping. That will hopefully help a lot. But we'll remain to see when it's going to happen.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it does sound like it's promising there, and I think it's also fair to point out that even today, if a user wants, let's say, just privacy from the merchant, even today, if they use a Lightning wallet like these Moon, Phoenix, Breeze, these kinds of ones, where you make a Lightning payment to the merchant. Now, yes, Moon, Phoenix, or Breeze might be able to surveil you, but at least the merchant doesn't know your balance. They don't know your transaction history. They just get paid on the Lightning Network. So at least there's something there, right? Like, so I think people tend to be very binary and all or nothing, and say, no, unless you're James Bond, Edward Snowden level private, you're not private. And it's like, well, who are you trying to be private from? And how much privacy do you really need? Is the average person who just wants to be able to, as an example, let's say they just want to make a donation to, let's say, a particular protest. If you used one of those wallets and you used like that swap functionality that's inbuilt, aren't you arguably getting a little bit of privacy that way? Now, I guess the counter argument would be, well, hang on, the authorities could just go to Moon and say, hey, give me all your data. So at that point, maybe you're in trouble. But in terms of how much work are they going to do, it might be at least a little bit of something that's more private. So I don't know. There's just
Yeah.
a few thoughts. I'm curious if you have
Oh yeah,
any.
definitely. Like, yeah, like say like they go to Moon, like give me all your data. Well, it's like, well, Moon wasn't the only one wallet sending to that merchant or whatever malicious actor they determined. So they can only get a small portion of the pie versus like we saw with the Canadian truckers. They were like, do not send to this address, where you couldn't really do that with Lightning. You could be like, don't send to this node pub key, but you just change your node pub key with something like trans LND or something, and you can just say like, oh, sorry, it's a new one every time. I don't know what to do here. So and then as well, like things like when I pay to a merchant, they have my on-chain UTXOs. You can go back and look and see like, oh, do this little chain analysis, and kind of sometimes you can figure out like, oh, this person sent us from a 15 Bitcoin UTXO. They have 15 Bitcoin. Maybe I'm gonna go follow them home and steal that from them. But with Lightning, it's like they only know the last hop, so most likely it's not even your hop. So you get a lot more privacy. So if you're transacting with someone you don't fully trust, that to not follow you home or whatever, you'll be protected in that regard, which is a huge improvement over the current Bitcoin today.
Yeah. Let's chat about Austin BitDevs. So you're one of the co-organizers for that, and can you tell us a little bit about what's happening in Austin's Bitcoin scene?
Yeah, I mean Austin, it's been blowing up. So I guess a little bit of history. I moved here beginning of 2020, and one of the reasons I moved here was because of the Bitcoin scene was big, and that's when our meetup was 20 people on a good day. And today we get about like 250 people. When it's a bull market, now it's a bear market, we get like 50. But but it's still a really good meetup here, and honestly, like I think for other people trying to run meetups, the biggest thing I think for us was consistency. Where every third Thursday at 7 p.m. we're at Unchained and we're talking Bitcoin, and that helps a lot. Like during COVID, almost every meetup shut down, but we only shut down for 6 months, and we kept it consistent ever since then. In September, it'll be 2 years from us for consistency. So that'll be I think that's like kind of something to hang your hat on, and I think we're really proud of that. So yeah, it's a great scene out here. We have like the whole Unchained folks. They have their huge office now, and they have the Commons as well, which is a great space to work at. Like me and a couple other people are working there like every day, And like it's really kind of beautiful because before I just like work at home or like see Bitcoiners like when we go out for drinks maybe that night, but like now it's like I'm working right next to them all day, so it's like you're coding and you're like, hey, what if someone did this? And then you all start just bouncing ideas. Next thing you know, you're on a whiteboard like drawing like state diagrams or something, and you get a lot more collaboration. So Austin's really bred a kind of a beautiful Bitcoin scene, and yeah, I recommend like every third Thursday we're having a meetup. So if you want to come out, I recommend people to come check it out.
Yeah, and for people who aren't familiar with BitDevs and what to expect, what sort of stuff, what goes into organizing a BitDevs specifically in terms of pulling together the resources and the content to discuss?
Yeah. So BitDevs isn't just like a hangout. We talk about Bitcoin. It's supposed to be a Socratic seminar. So the idea is like, Chatham House rules, no names here. We're just going to talk about Bitcoin and ideas, no people. And, don't attribute this to like, Ben said this. Let's just say like, someone has this cool idea at BitDevs. And we're doing all things, it's BitDevs, so development, we're all talking tech. So normally it's like me, Buck, and Justin. We kind of get a list of topics that we accumulate through the month. Mostly I just either reading the mailing list, Twitter, or like OpTech, or even the other meetups as well. We steal from them all the time. And once we have like our list of like maybe like 50 topics, the idea is to kind of we just like present it and maybe give a brief overview, like, oh, this is there's Lightning Labs released this idea Taro, and then we'll talk about it, and then someone from the audience, because really the idea is to draw the knowledge from the audience. We'll be like, oh, this Taro thing happened, and Ryan Gentry, biz dev at Lightning Labs will come up, be like, oh yeah, give a huge explanation on this, and then we'll talk about lighting privacy, and Tony Giorgio will come talk about it. And we're really just trying to just draw this ideas from the crowd, as well as kind of hash things out. There's a lot of times where like me, Justin, and Buck are like learning about this topic like 2 hours before the meetup, and we're like, I think it works this way, and then we'll just like basically like kind of work with the audience and understand it together like live. So it's a lot of fun in that regard, and it does take a fair amount of work, but it's definitely worth it. And I think like I get all the time people telling me like, I'm not a developer at all, or they even just got into Bitcoin. They're like, this was so cool. Like I didn't understand any of it, but I know I can eventually. And or other people like, oh, I have people that have been coming for years be like, they'll like challenge me now. They're like, oh, actually, why don't you do it like that? I'm like, oh shit, like you're not even a dev, and you can pull all this stuff off. So it's really a good meetup to come to, and it's great to bring like new people to as well, because like I remember like talking to some like high school friends. They're like, oh, I do Bitcoin development. And they're like, isn't it already developed? What do you do all day? And it's like, well, God damn it. So like coming there and they're like, oh shit, it's like a real thing that like it's not just like we're buying Dogecoin and going to the moon. It's like deep research on like things that we're saying big words that normal people don't know, and we know all of them sadly. But yeah.
So for anyone who hasn't been, any listeners, if you haven't been to a Socratic seminar or a BitDevs, I highly recommend you go. It's well worth your time if there's one in your area. There are some that are run online as well, but going to the ones in person is really worthwhile if you can. You tend to learn a lot, and there might be all these words at the start that you don't quite grasp. But they're very much worthwhile. I've been to some of the BitDevs in Austin during bull season, and I guess in the bull season, when there's 200 people in the room or 250 people in the room, it tends to be more like a kind of a lecture from yourself or from Buck or from whoever's explaining, because there's not as much chance for back and forth discussion. But when during bear time and sideways market, you do get more discussion time, and that is a bit more interactive, and perhaps you might even learn a bit more that way as well. But well worthwhile for people, so definitely check it out and go. If you don't have one in your local area, I suggest starting one. It's a good way. If you have at least a few technical friends or one or two, you can get it started and get it going that way. Bitcoin is a community thing, so we want to try to grow the community. So Bitcoin meetups are a great way of doing that. And
I want to say too,
go on.
like if you're looking to start a meetup in your place, like a lot of people say like because Austin and like New York and a couple other places have had wild success doing a bit devs, but like that works here because we have a lot of developers here and a lot of like talent and or at least people that are well informed on the ideas. Like if if you live in like rural Kansas and you have no developers, like don't start a BitDev, start like, something that fits your audience and your hosts. So, here we're doing well because, we're good at facilitating it. But if you're in, if you're not a developer, or, you don't have developers in your area that are willing to host it, well, then just start a normal meetup where you just like hang out and talk about Bitcoin, because, that's equally as fun. And like, in Austin, we have a similar, like we have the Austin Bitcoin Club where, they do exactly that. Where they just bring tacos and chicken and talk about Bitcoin. And that's like almost as big as the BitDevs now. So like, and it's a completely different crowd too, which is super cool. So you can get all sorts of different types of people coming to your meetup based on what you actually discuss there. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think to the point around Bitcoin privacy as well, to the extent that we can grow the peer-to-peer market for Bitcoin, and that may be where you find people who you just want to trade Bitcoin with. If maybe you're a miner and you want to sell some coins to cover your expenses, and somebody else there is a pleb and they just want to stack and they want to buy the coins off you, then that's kind of a common example. Or otherwise, what you can try to do is go to your local restaurants, bars, and say, hey, we want to run the meetup. Can we help set you up to take Bitcoin payment? And then that's a chance for local Bitcoiners to go and spend some sats and start this whole peer-to-peer aspect as well, which I think is going to be useful. So I think as a community, those of us who are really into Bitcoin, advocates, educators, builders, whatever you are in the Bitcoin world, that's something you could look at as well.
Yeah, 1,000,000% echo that. Yeah, in
So
Austin, we're not doing the best job of getting every business on Bitcoin, but we got a couple bars and food trucks, which is cool. So
hey,
it
it's a
is
start, right?
happening.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
got to start
we're
with
off
something.
zero.
Yeah. And so with the Bitcoin company, so tell us a little bit about that. So you guys are selling vouchers, and what else is coming from the Bitcoin company, just for SLP listeners who want to know?
Yeah. It's kind of like today what we're doing is kind of like letting people live on Bitcoin and basically paying you for it. So we're similar to like a folder bit refill right now, where you can buy gift cards, but we also offer Visa cards and international Visa cards that you just pay with Bitcoin, and we'll give you a little bit of Sats back for those. So yeah, like it's pretty cool right now. Like I think 75% of our sales or something are the international Visa cards, because we're getting like all these people who are just like, oh, I'm in Brazil and I love these things, and they're living on their Bitcoin. And this is kind of another way where, like, in the beginning we were talking about this KYC free way to buy Bitcoin, but like the Bitcoin company, we kind of solved the KYC free way to sell it, where we don't need to take your your ID, or a picture, a selfie of you. You just sign up with your email, and you can buy these Visa cards with your Bitcoin, which is most likely the way you're going to spend your Bitcoin. So you can essentially sell it KYC free with us, and we actually pay you for it. So it's kind of cool, and it's letting users live on their Bitcoin. And but the whole mission of us is basically just kind of be like the Bitcoin hub or Bitcoin super app. So something we're rolling out soon is like phone top ups, as well as other ways you can like earn Bitcoin, where things like you could link a credit card and like every swipe get Bitcoin back, eventually adding like an exchange and banking and all that stuff. So yeah, the holistic view is like eventually like delete like Wells Fargo, use the Bitcoin company, where you can get your direct deposit, make a pay off your credit card, and your checking account has a Bitcoin and a dollar balance. You can, if if it's 6 p.m. on a Saturday and you want to pay off your credit card bill, you don't have to wait, till Monday for the wire to go in. You can just send it in a Bitcoin payment and it'll pay off immediately. Kind of, it's just like let's modernize banking with Bitcoin, and just modernize everything with Bitcoin. And if you don't use the KYC free stuff, or if you don't want to use KYC stuff, we have the KYC free stuff, which we offer today. And it's kind of, if you want to go the full view, then sign up for that stuff. So we're trying to just like serve as much people as we can.
Sure, yeah, great. So we'll leave it there then. So listeners, go and follow Ben if you're not already following him on Twitter. So his Twitter is @BenTheCarman, and the website benthecarman.com. Ben, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan.